and hopefully we should be able to find some water there, and that's one of the major thrust areas as I see from the type of instruments that are being carried around.
All right. I want to also ask you about the 2021 project. If I could, briefly get you to comment on that, and then I'll open it up for discussion, because 2021, is extremely ambitious. It would be the first of a kind. What does that mean for the country?
I think it's a very important step that has been announced last year by the Prime Minister, and we are going ahead with it. We started our initial work with regard to the manned spaceflight with Rakesh Sharma and Ravish Malhotra, and this was followed up when ISRO wanted to launch their payload scientist on the space shuttle along with our satellite INSAT-1C.
Right.
It was unfortunate that there was an accident on the Challenger, and after that thing, no further payload scientists were sent up by the Space Transportation System. We were getting ready for various things connected with the manned space flight even as early as 1983-84 onwards. But now we have decided to go ahead with our own launch vehicle, our own capsule, and I think this is a very, very major step, and it will be a most adventurous kind of a mission as I see, looking at the mission profile.
Absolutely.
We need to follow up initially with unmanned flights, and after that the manned flight in 2021.
Yes. It's interesting that you call it both ambitious and adventurous in a certain sense. Mr. Davar, would you like to comment on that as well? Adventurous, more adventurous, or perhaps more exciting? Which of the two would you pitch it at?
Well, going to moon and to space is a more scientific as well as romantic, and now it has become a national pride also. Yes. India is one of the leading nations, in fact one of the 5 nations who have gone ahead into space, and now it's a routine matter for ISRO, the Indian Space Research Organization, to send satellites around the Earth. So much so that other nations are now asking us to send their satellites into space and into our orbit around the Earth. At one time, ISRO sent as many as 103 satellites in one rocket, and all successfully.
Yes.
And many of
if we could just focus on 2021 and apprise our viewers, Sumit, if I could come to you on that. 2021 is particularly ambitious, and it is it's history in the making as far as India is concerned, because it's the first time that it is open. For anybody and everybody. You could you could belong to any walk of life, and you could actually you actually have the opportunity to be a part of this mission. That's unprecedented.
Actually we have
I'll just get Sumit to answer that, and then I'll get you to comment.
When we look at a scenario like 2021, you see, every big mission starts with a dream. You have to dream big. And if you look at the track record of ISRO, and if you look at what we Indians have achieved, is phenomenal. Like what Sir said, 104 satellites.
Yes.
There are the cost, the amount of money we used to put Chandrayaan, we send an aircraft to or a spacecraft to the Mars is less than a Hollywood movie. There are remarkable things, because when you look from a technology point, when you talk of when you talk of a spacecraft, there are hundreds of technologies which go into it, starting from physics, aerodynamics, mechanics, chemical, software. It's an amalgamation of a lot of technologies coming, working together and working to perfection. So what you should see in this is not only a piece of iron or a rocket going up to the space. It is those thousands of pieces of technology which are working to perfection, and the point to be noted is that there are only 4 countries, will be the 4th possibly to get it right.
And
that's a big achievement.
Fourth country possibly to get it right, and what a matter of pride, because remember the Prime Minister, while he made this announcement, said that 2022 would be India's 75th year of independence, and before that we would have accomplished this feat if this dream is in fact indeed to be fulfilled, which one hope it does. Madhav Nalapat, you know, if I could bring you into the conversation, this is, you know, a very grand announcement that was made by the Prime Minister. Once again, you know, that feeling of national pride, to instill that sentiment, you know, him coming out and saying that pre-2022, you know, which is India's 75th year of independence, we would have accomplished this feat. What does this mean?
Well, I'd like to point out that the Indian space mission, ISRO, has been extremely successful. And I'd also like to say it has been successful at a relatively low cost. When you compare, for example, the other countries that have spent money on similar programs, they have spent way more than India. And secondly, almost entirely indigenous. There have been sanctions on India for decades. And there have been prohibitions on India getting technology from outside for decades. But despite all that, our scientists, our engineers, our technicians have persevered, and they have managed to reach this level, as has been said, the top 4 in the world.
Yes.
So it's something extremely creditable. It shows that we can do it. We have the manpower, we have the capacity, if we have the will and the right amount of political direction.
Yes, and I think the will and political direction is what has been put into this project, Madhav Nalapat. On that note, we also have our first caller on the broadcast, Sai Srinivas, joining us from Mumbai. Go ahead, Sai.
Thank you very much, ma'am. I would like to congratulate Chandrayaan and the whole team of ISRO and all of the expert panelists sitting there. And I would just like to say that this is a great mission. Just one thing I wanted to ask, why is the number of scientists or the technicians or the engineers being taken into ISRO and such establishments very low?
Okay.
And why not the number of manpower that is available in the country not being used to its optimum level by such great institutes?
Okay.
With due respect, ma'am. Thank you very much.
I think that's a fair question that is being posed, and it was one of the things that we would have talked about later in the broadcast. But since Sai has asked that question, let me first take it you know, to Pramod Kale. Pramod, would you like to take that question on? Because I think it's an interesting point of view that's coming a little earlier in the discussion. We would have sort of gotten into it in a bit, but you know, there is a question of whether we're using all of the manpower that is at our disposal, whether ISRO is actually all-inclusive, whether doors are actually open, and will the 2021 mission, for instance, address some of those problems?
Okay, the situation we have to really understand is that when we started, it was a small organization, it grew to a fairly large organization, and at one particular point of time, our organization, ISRO, had, when I retired, about 20 to 21,000 people working there. How large can such an organization really grow? We have got limited space, specific work which is now expanded, and a large amount of our work is actually being carried out. More than 70% of the work gets carried out in the Indian industry. All the engineers and all the scientists who are available, you will find that there are more than about 106 industries which are working towards fulfilling the requirements of the space program. All these people, where are they working? They're working in India, in our own country.
Okay.
So ISRO taking the limited number of people is not to be compared with this kind of a situation. In order to meet the human resources requirement for specific areas, ISRO has started the Indian Space Science and Technology Center, IST, near Thiruvananthapuram.
Okay.
IIST, Indian Institute of Space Technology.
Right.
And the engineers who come out from there, or the scientists who come out from there, most of them, more than 60% of them, are being absorbed in ISRO. A large number remaining also go to various Indian industries also. And this is going to be a very important thing. It is the industrial contribution which is going to be really very, very crucial in order for us to meet all the goals.
Okay.
So whether it is 2021 or even further than this, most of the work we are looking at.
You're in a certain sense broadening the scope of the conversation and talking about industrial contribution to this cause as well. But Mr. Davar, would you agree with that assessment? Would you agree with the fact that enough is being done? Of course, there's always room for more, but enough is being done in terms of making ISRO perhaps more inclusive, getting in more people, to participate in missions like this. Do you believe that enough is being done?
As far as the launch vehicles are concerned, we have achieved near perfection. 47 in a row launch vehicles have all, with one exception, have all been very successful. And now how much payload those has been also been increasing. Okay. From 1 ton, we have jumped now to 4 tons. As much as 4 ton payload, the capsule would be carried. And in this 4-ton capsule would easily accommodate 3 men as is being planned.
Right.
And one more additionally, we are also planning that the 3 persons who would be in, one would be female.
Right.
And their first.
So you're saying that that's in a certain sense a bid to make it more inclusive?
Yes, it is going to be a big thing, and the performance so far shows that we are certainly, it is not.
But do you believe, Sumit, that the doors are actually that open, or would you take in the criticism that one of our viewers has just voiced, that there isn't a clear path, it isn't it isn't something which is still very accessible, known, perhaps not enough information is shared, or not enough understandable information research is out there. It is a little convoluted and the walls are very high to scale.
Sure. Let me talk from my experience, right? I have, in my personal capacity, worked with ISRO, not as an employee, but I was before, one of my technology experience, I was representing an international company.
Right.
I know ISRO works on cutting edge technology. All the tenders are open. Everything is on the public internet. You have people from India who can participate. You have people from overseas who can participate.
Right.
So when it comes for ISRO inclusion, I think they are a very clear organization. It's based on my personal experience, because at that point of time I represented a company from Singapore, right? And they were US guys, they were Americans, they were Europeans, they were Russians. ISRO is a organization which has worked across people in the globe. So, having said that they are inclusive, there are no walls in ISRO. If you are capable, if you are Indian, you are preferred. If you are even a foreigner, you are welcome. That's how ISRO works. And this is not based on what I've heard, sir. It's based on my personal experience of working with ISRO. So, but the challenge is whatever is being done is kind of concealed. There has to be an optimum amount of secrecy maintained. There has to be an optimum amount of, we can't make, with due respect, we can't make YouTube videos and send them out.
Absolutely. Yes. So, I mean, let me get in a perspective from Madhav Nalapat as well, because I think it's important to get a non-tech perspective into this as well. Madhav, one of the biggest criticisms, and this isn't a new criticism, this is something that's always been talked about, that the walls are perhaps too high to scale, but then like Sumit says, it's par for the course. ISRO, can't be a body which is completely accessible, or it can't have a presence on YouTube where people are putting up videos and talking about the stuff that ISRO does.
Well, at one point ISRO was such a tiny dot of an organization in a beach in Kerala, and in fact a church, they took over a church and they set up their office there, and it's a remarkable history from then. The point is that a moon landing, for example, it can create a lot of spin-offs which will help all of us. It's not simply that, you're the landing on the moon to get some newspaper headlines.
Yes.
You can develop so many technologies, and ISRO over the last 30 years has developed so many technologies that have come into our daily lives. And I'd like to say that I'd like to see a little more YouTubes of that. I'd like to see a little more communications of the many ways in which ISRO has affected our lives for the better.
Right.
So then that will create an understanding among the public that this is money well spent.
All right, I think that's a very interesting point of view, that there is, of course, Sumit, like you said, there is an air of secrecy,
right?
And in view of security considerations, etc., I mean, one does understand that has to be maintained. But just to be able to interact, open communication channels, especially the youth. I mean, now when you're doing a mission like Gaganyaan, and you're opening it up literally to the country, to the people of the country. You had Mr. Davar saying that we'd like a woman to be on that. Children above a certain age group, of course, will be eligible, to put themselves in this, in this spot. Then isn't more communication extremely important, and communication about the things that you're allowed to communicate about?
Fair. I like to take that.
Yeah.
Fair enough. I have, to best of my knowledge, I can't vouch for it. I think ISRO is already on some social media.
Okay.
It keeps on sending the regular updates on the social media. So if you want to know what is happening is ISRO, you can follow them on Twitter or whatever, and you can keep on getting these updates. And you see the amount of anything which ISRO does is in the media at the end of the day. It's in the newspapers. It's not ISRO as the organization is not covered by only Indian media.
Yes.
It's also covered by international media.
Yeah.
So whatever successes have been there have been one-on failures as well. And all the media has talked great, huge about it. But if you look at 99% of the successes and a 1% miss, how do we know all of them? If there's no communication happening, if it is within the closed walls, then it will be like some of the, I don't want to take names, it will be like some of those countries which only talk about their successes. There's nothing called a failure in their history.
Yes.
So we talk about success, we talk about failure. So we can't talk about we are concealed.
Right.
But yeah, point taken, we can be a little bit more open on social media, but that is a call which chairman takes.
I think that's an interesting point of view. And I think what we also ought to talk about is, like Madhav said at the very outset, in his opening remarks, the fact that there is an era that has come where there is political will, there is backing in terms of willpower, financial backing that is being given to missions like this. I mean, Gaganyaan is an extremely ambitious mission for 2021, and if it does actually happen in 2021 prior, the 75th independent year of the country, it will be a matter of immense national pride. What does this now do in terms of putting India on the world map? Remember, if this happens, we'd be the fourth country, only the fourth country to be able to accomplish this. So what does this mean? Where have we been lacking so far when it comes, to the global scenario? Where are we placed currently, and where do we go from here? We'll talk a little more about that on the other side of what's going to be a very short break. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back. You're watching a very exciting broadcast here on NewsX. We're talking about space, science, technology. We're talking about ISRO currently, and before we slipped into this break, we said that we would ask our panel about what more can be done, as far as ISRO is concerned. Remember, there is huge amount of political will. There's a conversation happening around space, science, technology, involvement of people, a huge matter of national pride to look at, the Gaganyaan mission. And of course, Chandrayaan, which is now finally scheduled to happen in April after missing 2 launch windows. All eyes really are going to be on Chandrayaan. But, just to take this conversation forward, we do have Mr. Pramod Kale with us. He is an ISRO scientist, and I want to go straight to him. Mr. Kale, please break it down for our viewers, put it in perspective for our viewers. Where do we stand? Where does ISRO stand when it comes to the world map? Where are we placed? How far have we come, and where do we go from here?
I think we are really standing quite tall. As I see it, wherever I have gone, I have seen that there is a large amount of respect for the Indian scientists and the technology which we have achieved. But now going forward, when I look at it, last year and also in 2017 when I went to USA, I was able to see the place where the planet, where they made those small satellites. 80 of them we launched in the historic launch of 104 satellites. And last year I went and saw the SpaceX also. And what really impressed me was that in a small place, in a small area, they were able to do this kind of work. They were able to manufacture 5 satellites per week. Now, if we wanted to actually get to that particular level, it is not only the sophistication, because it is achieved. But I went there, I saw.
But that's what I want to understand from you. What do we need? Yes, but Mr. Kale, if I could ask you, what do we need to get there? Why is it that we're not there yet, despite the feats that we've accomplished? What is it going to take for an ISRO to reach NASA level? Is there enough political will? Is there enough financial backing? Or is there perhaps need for more? Does there have to be a renewed emphasis when it comes to the area of scientific research perhaps and in space and technology?
I think what is missing is not political. Political will is there.
Okay.
Financial freedom is there. Financial help is there. We have enough finances available. That is not the issue at all. The issue, as I see it, is that we do not have any specific industry which will deliver the entire end-to-end kind of a satellite or a vehicle. So if you were to look at NASA, look at them and find out large number of their launch vehicles are built in their private industry. The industry which was developed because they wanted to have the missiles, and this technology came from the defense side of it. We have started a civilian space program which was entirely applications oriented, and we are going ahead at our own speed without mixing the defense as well as the space research or the applications which we are carrying out.
I think that's an interesting point of view, and I also wanted at this juncture remind our viewers that our phone lines are open. So if you have any questions, pertaining to to our man on the moon mission, on what lies ahead as far as space science and research in India is concerned, what lies ahead before 2021. If you want to, for instance, be a part of it, you could question our panel of experts on what you need to do in order to be able to be a part of it. Remember, it is 2021 that has opened its doors for the first time for people of this country to participate in this extremely grand and proud moment. But I want to stick to the conversation surrounding ISRO and perhaps bring in Mr. Davar as well. Do you believe enough is done, or is it finally that the time has come?
Well, we were ahead of China once.
Yes.
When we landed a probe, rather it crash landed on the moon, but it worked for one year. It worked up to August 9. It worked there, so we were ahead.
Yes.
But now, as we know, only last month, China has landed a soft landing of a rover on the far side of the moon.
That's right.
So that is a step which is ahead of us.
We need to play catch up.
We need to catch up.
Yes.
And our moon mission has been rather sluggish in the last few years.
Was Chandrayaan in the last 2 years a missed opportunity? What went wrong there? I mean, of course, there is a lot of anticipation around Chandrayaan now. There are the fingers crossed that it's going to launch in April.
Only today, chairman of ISRO made a statement that Chandrayaan 2 would be launched by the end of April this year. So this has been postponed. This mission has been postponed for quite some time. But now a definite date has been given.
Yes.
No, not definite date, but at least a target has been fixed.
Yes.
That by the end of April, the Chandrayaan 2 would be.
No, I think it's very important, Mr. Davar, while we talk, of course, about the exemplary feat, the achievements, the roadmap ahead. I think it's important, and I really respect the fact that you've sort of talked about the caveats as well. You've talked about the uncomfortable conversation as well. Madhav Nalapat, many believe that it hasn't been all well. ISRO, like you also said, they started out small. They haven't been very demanding. They've never been really the forefront of a conversation. But what Mission 2021 has done is that it has gotten people of the country to finally talk about space, know more about it, ask questions. It's opened doors in a certain sense, for the very first time. So it is unprecedented, especially when we look at Gaganyaan. So far, these are news stories, these are fascinating visuals, perhaps good reads, but never really something that the people of this country have been able to actively partake in.
Well, I think it's important to ask the right questions. And if you look at the Atomic Energy Commission and ISRO, two organizations that have been very successful even by global standards, you will find both of them have been headed by technicians. The Department of Atomic Energy and the Department of Space are almost always handled by scientists and not by generalist administrators. And that has made a huge difference in the way they have been managed. Now you, Mr. Poe, hand over, for example, the DRDO unfortunately, has been under the control of generalists for quite some time, and you have seen the problems at DRDO. So the fact that we have to trust our technical people, and we have to trust in their ability to manage their own affairs.
Yes.
So from that point of view, the space program has been fortunate, because in several instances you have had a prime minister being paired with a top person in the program, like for example Indira Gandhi and Vikram Sarabhai,
Yes.
who got along very well with each other, and who therefore there was a meeting of minds, and therefore freedom was given. I presume that Prime Minister Modi is also giving, hopefully,
Yes.
a similar freedom
Yes.
to the current scientists, because if that happens, I can tell you, there's nowhere we can't go. I just want to add one more point. In the past, there have been instances where foreign governments have tried to intervene. For example, the cryogenic engine program, where a foreign intelligence agency tried to influence some of our police to file fake charges against some scientists. So yes, ISRO has gone through some amount of torment as well.
I think it's very interesting that you raise that point, and I know, Sumit, you want to come in. You want to respond to that.
You see, when you look at an organization like ISRO, the kind of technology they handle is not something which you can go from and buy from a grocery shop. And there are a lot of forces, there are a lot of vested interests in the world which don't want India to kind of have that technology. Right. So when we look at the cryogenic engines, look at PSL, we look at a lot of other things which are involved. So with all these odds and what Mr. Dhawan rightly said, there have been issues in the past. We have overcome them.
Yes.
We have let them go behind. We have delivered. I think the only challenge is that, do we as Indians put our national pride behind ISRO and its scientists or not? Look at America. Whenever you launch, you see flags of NASA. You see these kids wearing NASA caps and t-shirts.
Okay.
You see our colleges and our universities and our schools taking their kids to US to see NASA.
Right.
But how many of them, I would like to use your media to ask this question, how many of
That's
them
very
take
important,
kids to ISRO?
Yes.
How many of us wear ISRO t-shirts and
I want
caps?
to very quickly bring in Madhav Nalapat into the conversation back. Madhav, as somebody who sort of analyzed this, do you agree with Sumit? Do you think that it's time to have that conversation, because ISRO doesn't have this same brand value, so to speak, that a NASA does, because we as a country haven't really put that kind of emphasis on it.
Do you agree with Sumit? Poorer country, and there have been governments in the past that have frankly underfunded the space program and the atomic program for whatever reason. But yes, I fully agree with him that it's important to celebrate success.
Yes.
And ISRO is a success. And I do believe that it would be a good idea if, for example, people were to go and see, for example, some of what has been happening in some of these laboratories. There's no doubt about it.
Yes.
I myself have gone to Tumba. I have talked to the scientists there. I can see the excitement and dedication I could see long years ago when I went there. And I think that was infectious. I got that excitement myself. I got that dedication and that confidence myself. So yes, I do believe we must make an effort to inculcate the scientific temper and scientific spirit in our people, and ensure that they value science, they trust science, and they understand the importance of science.
Okay, I think I want to sort of just shift our focus. I think we've had almost a consensual discussion. No dissenting voices here. No two people who disagree with each other here on the broadcast. It's very heartening to see that everyone sort of agrees with the fact that, look, this is a great organization that has done some great work, but again has the potential to do so much more. But I want to focus on 2021, because I think for viewers a conversation about ISRO is of course interesting, but what's interesting is details of 2021. What is what is 2021 all about? Mr. Dhawan, if you'd like to take that on first. I mean, you have 3 astronauts given this window of opportunity to spend 7 days, in space, landing on the moon. There are discoveries. Like you said, we need to play catch up with China right now. What does this 2021 opportunity entail?
Actually, behind this national pride and this political will now also in support of the scientists, there is another opinion also. The nation is also somewhat divided on this, and that is a matter of priorities. There are people who also say that we have health problems, we have educational problems, and we have farmers' problems, we have agricultural problems, and those are
to be addressed first.
So the people just scoff at bullet train, for example. They say, do we need a bullet train?
Yes.
Similarly, do we need to go to moon before solving?
But I think can can you equate the two? I think because you used it as an example, and I'd like to bring it in here. Can you equate the two? You know, I don't think bullet train and space research can perhaps be said in the same breath. Would you agree with that?
What happened is, slightly different from what Mr. Dhawan said. We missed 2 launch of the Chandrayaan, but we got 104 satellites, right?
Yes.
We got the Mars mission right, which Chinese have not still been able to get a mission to the Mars right.
Yes.
Now, we are sending a man up in space at $4 billion, if you look at the numbers.
Absolutely.
And if you compare it with any of the international organizations, it's peanuts. What amount of money they have spent to get a man up on the space, the amount of money we have spent on Mars mission, we have spent on this Gaganyaan is very minuscule. What happened after the Mars mission? How many countries have come and launched their satellites from us? There are countries from Kazakhstan, Singapore.
So you're talking about impact.
So it's about the impact. I think the amount of money we spend on Mangalyaan, if you look at a 5-year window, 10-year window, we'll always recover that. The amount of money we spend on it will recover that. Because ISRO is also a commercial organization. It launches satellites. It sells bandwidth. It's essential for our military comms. Because for a country of our size, look at our coastline. Don't you think the military comms is essential? Because when it comes to satellite, the best and the most reliable for military comms is satellite.
Yes.
And broadcast, of course, needless to say, is military comms. So ISRO is also a commercial organization. It also makes the money you put on it. So in a way, if you put a money, you will get a return of investment. It might be 5 years, it might be 10 years down the train.
Madam Nalapad, if I could get you to respond to it, would you agree with that assessment that there is this criticism that is leveled a lot of times, and it's a point of view, it's a political point really. When you had Mr. Dhawan say that the same critics look at why funds are allocated to space. The same critics say why we need bullet train. Is that a fair argument? Because I could puncture the argument with 1 or 2 points. So I want to get in your point of view. Is that the general fall guy, that this is not as important as feeding our people, this is not as important as security, this is not as important as the farmer crisis or an agrarian crisis?
Actually, if you look at what ISRO scientists have talked about during their careers, this is precisely what, frankly, many foreigners ask the scientists. Oh, you're coming to us with a space program, you're coming into an atomic program, your country is a bullock cart country, it's a country of snake charmers, why are you spending money on this kind of program?
Yes.
You should just go back to charming snakes and building bullock carts. So this kind of thing has been said before. But the point is that the space program or the atomic program, there are tremendous spin-offs in agriculture, in industry, in health, and in numerous other ways. And yes, maybe ISRO has got a Twitter feed that unfortunately very few people log on to. Maybe they're doing something on YouTube. But the reality is that I think it's very important for not only the government but civil society as well to understand that these organizations are doing immense good across the spectrum and actually helping tens of millions of lives.
Yes, absolutely. Impacting lives in ways that are perhaps not so direct, that you can't immediately see or feel or touch, but impacting lives nonetheless. I think that's a really good note to take a very short break on. We will come back and talk a little more about this, and we also like to remind our viewers that our phone lines are open. So dial us, tell us what you think about it. Do you think this is India's time has come? Do you think that it's time for we the people of the country to talk about space, to talk about this extremely fascinating dimension, and what really does 2021 mean? Does it open up doors and windows that were perhaps previously shut, conversations that were never had before? We'll talk about all that and more on the other side of a very short break. Welcome back. You're watching a very special broadcast here on NewsX. We're talking about, in the break, I was just having a conversation with our panelists about how the ROI when it comes to ISRO is extremely high. So it's not just an organization that's burning taxpayers' money, but it's actually an organization where it's putting its money where its mouth is. Let me get in a quick perspective from Mr. Pramod Kale. He's an ISRO scientist, of course, with us. So an inside opinion, Mr. Kale, I'm sure you would agree. But, is it true that if there were perhaps a renewed focus or, a fine-tooth comb allocation of funds for the kind of projects that you could undertake, it could lead, of course, to a much more, how do I put it, a much more renewed emphasis. I think you need to look at ISRO, the development in that sector, with perhaps a fresh pair of glasses.
I think the most important thing here would be that when we talk about using the specific data that our satellites are generating, then we have to start looking at as to how the data is actually being utilized. When we started our initial work for getting the meteorological images of India and all the area around us, we really saw as to what can be actually done. That data has to be utilized properly. Same is the case with the remote sensing data. And this data, if it is properly utilized, we will see very much larger renewed interest. And that is something which is really required today to focus upon.
Okay. Madam Nalapat, would you agree with that point of view?
And I think it's very important to understand that, you know, there must be a good public-private partnership.
Right.
And from what I know from ISRO, the scientists there have always tried to involve private companies, including small private companies, and that is a very welcome step. The point is that there should be a certain amount of freedom from bureaucratic control and from bureaucratic, if I may say so, restrictions on ISRO. And ISRO fortunately has not had as much of it as some other departments of the government. But it's very, very important, as has been correctly said, that the benefits of the science developed by ISRO, the benefits of discoveries of ISRO should be transmitted to the common man.
Yes.
And that transmission mechanism, in my view, is almost as important as a space vehicle.
Yes.
So, which unfortunately, I don't think as much attention has been paid to that transmission mechanism. It's not a problem of the scientists, it's a problem of the institutional framework around the scientists.
Right. You know, would you agree, Mr. Dawar, that, you know, it's for too long, Madhav Nalapat also believes that ISRO has worked in the background with the people of the country, perhaps not realizing you know, the real value of the technology, of the work that ISRO is doing. I mean, you know, Sumit said, made the exact same point, that it's an undervalued organization.
That's true. There is not sufficient awareness about what could be industrial and commercial value of the research being done in this field, in the space research. So there need to be, people need to be told.
People need to be told.
But
Sumit, if I could bring you back into the conversation, do you believe that with the current announcements that have been made by the Prime Minister, the renewed focus that one is seeing, I mean, we're having, you know, a discussion, an hour-long discussion here on the space missions that have been planned. We're talking about Chandrayaan, we're talking about 2021. Do you think there's finally, you know, the time has come?
I think the first and the most important thing is for the leadership to set the course.
Yes.
That what Prime Minister Narendra Modi has successfully done, and thankfully so.
Yes.
If you go a few years back, you see the first major budget which ISRO got was at the time of, I think, President APJ Abdul Kalam Azad, because he was a scientist. He could understand and appreciate the kind of work they were doing. So they got the first, you know, some amount of sizable budget to play with. Now after that, ISRO has constantly, you know, delivered. Now after the political, what is the next thing? The common perception is that, I'll like to answer in two parts. First is the common perception. What do I get out of a Chandrayaan? What is ISRO doing for me? I am living in some village and all.
What does it do? Tell our viewers.
Yes. You know, I can't go into details. I have some preview because I worked with them for some time. But what I can tell you, ISRO runs numerous telemedicine projects wherein the doctors remotely attend patients, guide them to the medicine. ISRO helps in border surveillance. We have a huge border going across Himalayas. We have border going around the Siachen Glacier. When we saw Uri attacks and all, you know, we saw those, we could see images. Where do the images come from? Where does the NTRO get satellites from? Where does Navy Coms come from? Where do our so many military base, air bases talk to each other? Where do we get K-band? And, you know, important, how are we talking to the people? It's a satellite, is broadcasting.
Absolutely.
So all these things are going to the people right now, right? And over and above that, they make their money from launching satellites. They make their money. Forget everything else. You know, what is the image we make? The most important point I want to make is the image we make. India has been known for IT, technology, software. But with these kind of missions, what is the image we're sending? We're sending a much bigger image.
I think that's a very important point. And you know, what does this mission mean for India? Who these people should be? Remember, it's 3 people going into space for a period of 7 days. That's a window of opportunity that's opened up in 2021. It's extremely exciting. We've talked a little bit about that. We've also talked about ISRO. Remember, these images that we put out on your screens serve a lot more than just an intrigue value, in our lives. The reason we're having this conversation today and the reason a lot of things happen for us is because, there are some extremely capable people doing some extremely credible work in the background. I think on that note, we'd like to end this broadcast. A big thank you to all my guests for joining me on this very special discussion, and a big thank you to the viewers if you've been watching. Thank you.